Hello and welcome to the Trumped Up Podcast, Season 3, Episode 9, Fact Checkers, Fraud, and Foreign Interference. I am your host, Keith Rao, and this week has been pretty interesting so far. We're going to get a lot of things like the media and the mass exodus from Fox News. But first, let's get into fact-checking and all these warnings that are going on Twitter and Facebook about elections and results and projections and hey, turns out that Candace Owens actually filed a lawsuit against Facebook and their fact checkers, and she's going to need a lot of money to fight this legal battle. So if you go to www.factcheckzuck.com, make a donation, you help her out, and maybe we can get rid of these stupid, not so independent fact checkers, as she pointed out, that the major outlet that Facebook uses for fact checkers is run by a long-term former employee of Facebook itself. I would imagine Twitter falls under the same thing. Facebook actually uses 50 different fact-checking sites. One of them was actually Newsweek magazine, sadly enough. I don't know when Newsweek magazine became the purveyors of truth, but they're not. I am. And people like me are, and fellow podcasters, and all you great fellow patriots out there spreading the truth despite being fact-checked and censored like nonstop on the internet. But you're going to start seeing a mass exodus because of this from sites like Twitter, with people going to Parler, mass exodus off of Facebook. There actually is a planned Facebook protest of people going Facebook over to Parler for a day to hit Zucker where it counts. You know, the funny part about Facebook is I've read like hundreds of times over the last few years that, yeah, Facebook's all right, but MySpace was so much cooler, man. You could put backgrounds that were cool, and you could put like music in your profile, and Facebook isn't even smart enough to figure out how to do this. So, I'm not going to believe they're fact checkers, but really, I don't need you to fact check me. I mean, post things about that are like opinion. Like, for 4 years, the left was able to write, Donald Trump is not my president freely, with no censorship, no warning or nothing. But if today or yesterday you wrote, Joe Biden is not my president, or he's not my president, you would have received a warning about elections. Like, hey, Facebook, you have no official duty in elections. Maybe the government paid you money to spread the word, but I would imagine it was more likely the DNC that paid you money to spread the word and help get record numbers of people to register to vote during the pandemic we're having. So yeah, once again, if you want to help Candace Owens and all of us fight the Facebook falsehoods and fake fact checks and things are taken out of context and the stupidity, where you have no even ability to appeal these fact checkers' decisions and provide evidence to them, which is called due process under the Constitution. So if they were in a court of law, that wouldn't fly. But Facebook's a private company, so I don't know how that works. But if they're actually violating Section 230 by acting as a producer of content and not being independent like they claim, because every damn one of us knows on both sides of the aisle that Facebook is far from independent, nor is the media, as we're all finding out drastically. I would have called them corporate media before. I would have called them left-wing media. I would have called them mainstream media. But seeing Fox News joined in and making a horrible prediction of a state based on incorrect data in a program called Orbital. Yes, Orbital puts in is a statistics. It decides the odds and figures out who's going to be winner based on the information that's put in. But the information put in was based on 98% of precincts reporting, when really, in reality, only 84% of the precincts in Arizona at that point had actually provided official numbers, which none of these numbers are official, period, at all in this election until one in states where there's going to be a recount, which this is going to be the year 2000 on steroids. There's going to be at least 5 states holding manual recounts by hand. States like Georgia, despite having the electronic system to vote where the machines are having problems, this is well documented in one Michigan county, they actually flip the votes in this machine, which we'll get into that whole vote flipping thing in a minute, but they also have paper backups. Isn't that great? But the reality of this is there's some fishy stuff going on out there, and I mean, you're telling the media that, oh, we're going to start counting our votes in Philadelphia, and then suddenly they didn't stop counting. Even after a court order told them to stop, they continued counting, but in the middle of the night, they continued counting in secrecy. 6 feet originally, if it was 6 feet, but it was 6 feet where they were standing, but then they moved the tables farther away, and at 6 feet, maybe with binoculars you could see what the hell's written on a ballot, but there's lots of videos of people filling out things on ballots, and yes, some states they can do that if it's a cult. They make an assumption of who they think, but I don't think they should do that. I think they should just put those aside to be debated later, but that's a whole other ballgame. But I've been seeing these things being posted around social media about a lot of these ballots may have actually been printed in a foreign country, probably China, which I don't know why, because we have plenty of printers in America. But the best option for ballots, paper ballots, which should be in every state should have to take paper if they're going to use an electronic system as a backup. I believe 100% in voter ID, where they should also make sure it's you, make sure you're a living person, and that your address matches where you registered to vote, so we don't have people voting in multiple jurisdictions in America. Which, in Vegas there, we've seen that it's likely that people moved out of Vegas area of Nevada earlier this year, and they voted there, as well as wherever the hell they moved to and registered to vote there. Why, if there's a national database for sex offenders where it's put in by each jurisdiction where the person lives, but there is a federal database of all these sex offenders. So why isn't all these state election offices connected electronically? I mean, American Idol can tabulate 150 million votes in one commercial break, but you can't create a simple freaking software program that when somebody registers a vote, it goes into a federal database to say this person's registered to vote here. So if your name hits somewhere else, bam, fraud alert, fraud alert, fraud alert. Hey, there's a simple solution. Because like Donald Trump, I'm not a politician, but I sure as hell got a lot of better ideas than any of them people do, especially the crazy squad members, who I believe has gained a new member. But don't worry about it. These 5 people have never done anything in Congress except run their mouths. So any of you who have ever worked in retail or purchased something with cash in America, the U.S. government put security features and watermarks into their bills so you can tell if there's counterfeit. Granted, there are some really good counterfeiters out there, and some of these slip through in the system. But for the most part, anybody who's worked with cash knows how to inspect a dollar bill or a $100 bill or a $20 bill to see if it's real. So why the hell don't we just have the U.S. Treasury print ballots for all 50 states on the same similar paper to what they use for money? We don't want to use the same paper because that's money, but something with a similar system with those markings in there and those security features on the ballots. So if suddenly ballots mysteriously appear in the middle of the night, we'll know they're counterfeit. It would reduce fraud. Granted, there still would be some, because every election, on average, there's 1 to 2% fraud. But this presidential election, 140 million people, possibly, number still debatable, could be higher, could be lower. We don't know. Because the numbers aren't official, and presently there's still people counting. And in the state of Nevada, they can receive ballots till next Thursday, November 12th, 2020. Ironically, the very next day when they're going to release the numbers will be Friday the 13th. And I'm going to find it hilarious on Friday the 13th. There's also a full moon and something weird happens. But that's just me thinking of weird things. But yeah, so if they did this at the Treasury with the ballots, it would resolve a lot of that problem. So wouldn't voter ID. Now, the Democrats continuously will tell you voter ID is racist. I don't know how being required to have an ID is racist in the first place. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're required to have ID in public. And if you don't, and you deal with a police officer, and you match the identity of somebody else, guess what? You're going to have to go down, get booked, get your fingerprints until they realize, oh, sorry, sir, we were mistaking you for somebody else that you looked very much like. And you didn't have an ID, so it's your own fault. But no, the ID thing is not racist. This is a false narrative spread by the media and all these big money organizations behind it because they want to allow for fraud to continue. Like in Philadelphia, where fraud has been rampant for decades, maybe 4 or 5. But it's just crazy, the stuff they want you to believe. And the media spreads this bullshit every day. And the more they do it, the more irrelevant they're becoming, and they're losing their share. And I think they understand this, and they don't know how to frickin' deal with it. Because people like me will just join a website and start their own damn podcast and put their own opinion out there because everybody's got an opinion, but my opinion isn't exactly the same as the next guy's opinion. And I have different beliefs on social issues than a lot of my conservative friends because I'm an independent and I'm in the middle of the road. And if you'd like to check out our new description, it's much better and it's more broad of the podcast, and it's just cool or to make it more about something. Originally, my intention was when I named this Trumped Up, that was a euphemism for it's effed up. Because a lot of the stuff I seen in the streets was effed up, but then Donald Trump is our president. He still is, and he will be till January 20th at 11:59 a.m. So when these people are telling you Joe Biden's your president, no, he's not. He still has to live long enough to make it to then. And with increasing COVID numbers and the amount of people he was surrounded by yesterday, it wouldn't shock me if he suddenly got it before he ever took office. And then Kamala takes over. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but hey, ISIS terrorist sleeper cells existed, and they told me that was a conspiracy theory 20 years ago. You know, some people still believe 911 was an inside job, but that's their conspiracy theory. But hey, you can't say it wasn't or it was, because nobody can prove this. And that's usually how things go. If you don't have hard evidence of something, which is going to be a problem with a lot of the legal challenges that are going on, like claims of fraud, but you have to have really good evidence, circumstantial evidence, and it won't get you anywhere, and the judges will likely throw those cases out. Now, where there's Pennsylvania, that's a different issue altogether because their election closed at 8 p.m. and their legislature last year passed a law called Proposition 77, which says votes count till 8 p.m. on election day. If you want to say I'll give you a grace period till midnight, okay, that's the same day. But at 12:01 a.m. on the next day, no more ballots should count that come in after that unless they were postmarked and it's a legible postmark. If it's debatable, you assume that it's not before that. That's the way a judge will work that, as far as I know. But yeah, so they have these challenges there. And then they have equal protections clause in the Constitution where if somebody over here was treated one way and somebody over there is treated a different way, then that means they're going to be treated equally under the Constitution. And then whatever happened there was unconstitutional. And we're going to be interesting to see what happens with that whole matter. So in Pennsylvania, they also have this challenge of election day is November 3rd. Or this year. It's the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November every year, as it was written in the Constitution. There's an election day. Early voting, okay, I get it. Absentee ballots, if you have a good reason, like if you have a mental health problem or autism and you really can't deal with people, okay. If you have a physical disability and you can't get out of your car or in a car, like I heard that one claim that the lady was so ecstatic at her age that she got to vote because they had these drive-up voting locations in some places. Remember, she could have requested an absentee ballot and voted anyway, but somehow she got in her car. So if she got in her car, how can she not get out of her car? Maybe she needed assistance, but she still could get in and out of her car, or otherwise she wouldn't be in the car in the first place. That's how stupid the media in this country is. Really. They tell you these stupid-ass things like that. Oh, the lady, she voted at the thing and she would... No, she would have been able to. It's called absentee. You call your voter plate, your register of voters, or your town clerk, or whoever does it in where you live, Board of Elections, whatever it's called, and you request an absentee ballot. Not like California, where, hey, anyone who's registered to vote, and we register everybody to vote when they get a driver's license, and driver's licenses go to legal immigrants in California, but that's another ballgame, and that's rampant for fraud too, so, yet again, but yeah, so we get all these, but yeah, the fraud is just rampant. But if it's normally 1 to 2% and you have record turnout in a presidential election year, and 6 states had record turnout also because they legalized marijuana, or they voted to legalize marijuana, because every state that puts marijuana on their ballot has record turnout, and I would recommend to our president to just reschedule it and let the states make their own laws about marijuana and tell the federal government to vote to put a 10% tax on it. And then once it's not in a classification of hard drugs, then banks can deal with these damn dispensaries instead of them having to run somebody's debit card. They won't take credit cards. They'll only take debit cards or cash at dispensaries, if you didn't know this, because they're not allowed to deal with, banks aren't allowed to deal with things that are against cash from things that are against federal law, because federal laws are stupid. And hi, times have changed before the government caught up. Times have changed before the government caught up. So times are going to change with healthcare before the government catches up. So by the time they ever fix healthcare, they'll be 10 years behind. So to the crazy people out there that thinks the government's the solution, wake up. The government is the problem. No government program has ever worked like intended, and the government will never fix anything in reality. Really, they won't. It's just what it is. Just like Democrats are always talking about gay marriage and how they're for people's equal rights, and they didn't pass any laws about this. Certain states did, but the federal senators and Congress people didn't do it. The Supreme Court gave the right to people, because everybody should be treated equally. I agree, especially in this election. So we're going to move on from the fraud thing in a minute, and we're going to get into my theory about foreign interference in our election and other collusion stories and great things. But we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back at the Trumped Up Podcast. Hey, you too can join the podcasting world and be one of the greatest podcasters out there. Build an audience, get sponsorships, earn money, and do many, many interesting things. You can also get listener support to help sponsor your show, all by using Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to become a podcaster. Anyone can do it. If you got something to say, or someone thinks you got something to say, or you just want to say something, come and join Anchor and join the podcasting revolution. Hello, and welcome back to the Trumped Up Podcast, Season 3, Episode 9, Fact Checkers, Fraud, and Foreign Interference. I am your host, Keith Rao. And as always, we break it down for the average person. We're not in the media bubble. I am an outsider. I don't come from the Washington, D.C. political world. I don't come from the media bubbles of D.C., Chicago, New York, Miami, and anywhere else or even Hollywood for that matter. I'm a regular guy. Yes, I live in the blue state of Massachusetts, but hopefully that'll change someday. But it's not likely. But I do have a Republican governor, but he's a rhino. And he's Mr. Lockdown suddenly again with stupid crap, but let's not get into local politics of Charlie Faker, my opinions of him. But if you want to look him up, yeah, he's a total rhino with his mask mandates. Supposedly, it's a curfew now. You got to be, you can't be out in public after 10 p.m. Like the virus knows this, right? 10 p.m. Virus going to take a nap. You're not going to get infected. But yeah, now you're supposed to wear a mask outside, even if you can socially distance. So apparently, if I go for a walk around my block in 10 p.m., but it's not an order. It's an advisory. An advisory. That's like a winter weather advisory. Now, if you're driving down the road in the winter, yeah, use caution. It's just common sense. I don't need the government to tell me to use caution. I don't need the government to tell me to wash my hands, I'm like Sheldon Cooper. I'm a freaking germaphobe, yo. I don't need you to tell me. Seriously. But back to that fraud thing, yeah. Normal elections, there's 1 to 2% of fraud. And with this record turnout we're having, I know we were going to move on from this, but I had to get this point at 1 to 2%. So you figure with record turnout of 140 million, you're going to have like 4 to 5%. 4 to 5% of 140 million. Let's figure out what that is in life. 140 million people voted, roughly. That's still debatable. Times we'll say 4%. Wait, calculator's not cooperating. 140 million times 4. Let me go back. 0.04 here, and let's see. So, if you have 4% fraud in your election nationwide, that's 5.6 million people. 5.6 million. But even if you had the average of 1 to 2%, then that's half of that's going to be 2.8 million people. That could change a lot of states. And remember, none of these numbers are official. And 2 states certify them, and then it's still not official until the Electoral College votes. The electors of the Electoral College vote for that candidate. There are things called faithless electors. In 33 states, it's law. You have to vote for the candidate your state chose. But in 17 states, these faithless elector laws don't exist, and they probably shouldn't, but states can make these laws constitutionally, according to what I read about it. So in some of these states, if the Republican-led state legislatures, which they have both houses in a lot of states, even with Democrat governors in some of them, they could literally send different electors, and they could defect and vote for the opposite side, even if the people of their state chose the other side. This is totally legal, totally constitutional, and would totally end up in the Supreme Court, guaranteed 100%. But it is a thing that the Republicans have in their arsenal that they could use if they really want to be tough like Donald Trump. Or if not, and you see these Republicans flipping in saying things in support of Biden, or they're already out saying that Biden's the president-elect, get over it. Yeah, write them off and make sure you find your people in your state. Find a primary challenger for these clowns. Because remember the Drew guy in New Jersey from the impeachment, who after the impeachment was a congressman, and he switched from Democrat to Republican. He actually won re-election as a Republican because he's that aligned with the president. But if you're against the president, you should be sent packing. So I've been going over a possible scenario in my head for a few days here. I keep seeing and reading the news and hearing about record numbers of COVID cases. Granted, testing went up in record amounts. So I don't know what the percentage of false positives with these tests are, so I couldn't tell you if we're doing 300 million tests and say there was the same false positivity rate of 1 to 2% of the election, that's say to 2%. That means 2% of all these positive cases that they're saying people are asymptomatic would likely be false positives. But I don't know. Could be 50%. I don't know how effective these testings are. I don't know also if you have the common cold, which is a COVID virus, if you'll test positive, and that's where the numbers are coming for. But remember, we've heard about Russia for 4 years. Russia, like Marsha Brady on the Brady Bunch. And it was Jan saying it to Marsha, but whatever. Went off track there, but yeah. So China supposedly they told us to blindly believe this Russia crap with no evidence for 4 years. Now they're telling you, don't believe what you're seeing, despite all this evidence that's literally everywhere. Literally, we can see all this evidence of all the crazy things that went on in this election. Really, the election system in America needs an overhaul. That's all I'm going to say. It's not modernized. It's outdated. And, that was my point of it's everywhere you go, like if you go out and buy alcohol, if you buy cigarettes, if you're trying to get public benefits from your state like welfare or you apply for Social Security, you have to have an ID, and it's not racist then. You can get a driver's license. They won't give you the driver's license if you don't have several forms of ID. You can't go in a federal bill whenever this real ID law totally kicks in. You won't be able to go in a federal building, get on an airplane, or many other government buildings if you don't have one of these real IDs. So how's the person with no ID do any of this stuff? I really don't get it, but it's not racist. Remember that. It's not racist. That's a false narrative that's continuously spread by the media to create division in this world. And if the media didn't exist, the world would be a much better place, period. Because they continuously want things to be chaotic. Speaking of this, all these major news outlets, minus Newsmax, who's put a statement out, and they're not going to call it until it's 100% official, because that's called having standards. Just like in 2000, the entire media called it for Al Gore, and Just like Hillary Clinton, Al Gore is still not your president, although he made a shitload of money scamming people with his climate change agenda. And if you don't believe it's bullshit, yeah, you might want to dig a little more into Al Gore. But yes, he was announced on election night. He was the winner. And George Bush said, screw you. No, you're not. I am the winner. And George Bush was still our president. So if anybody thinks this is official before all these numbers have been released, you're out of your freaking minds. Don't look. There was a mass exodus from Fox News, which we'll get into. Judge Janine got fired because supposedly years ago or recently, I don't know when it was, she said some Islamophobic comments, and now they're going after Tucker. So I hope they both come over to Newsmax, and I hope they bring Hannity and Laura Ingraham with them. And we get a few other great conservatives like Mark Levin to head over there too, because Levin, man, he's having a censorship battle with all of big tech, man. It's outrageous, the things they're trying to do to that guy. You know why? Because like me, he's a purveyor of truth. So let's get into that for a second. This is the new definition of the Trumped Up podcast. I'm a professional media critic, expert political commentator, and purveyor of the truth. The Trumped Up podcast takes an in-depth look at trumped up charges, media narratives, political agendas, and social issues and big tech censorship. Hosted by me, Keith Rao, the author of The Democratic Asylum, a Political Manifesto, which is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, the Trumped Up podcast brings you a political and media outsider's view on the world today. So even if you're a liberal, tune in. Because you're going to learn a lot of shit you ain't been hearing on the media. And back to that Fox News thing. You know, I really had no idea. I didn't even know I had Newsmax until recently. And I started watching it, and I'm like, oh, there's some good shows on here, like, the heck was that guy's name? I was watching a show, this Carson guy, and but he's like insulting politicians on both sides of the aisle and news people and making fun of all kinds of stuff, man. It's hilarious. Rob Carson, something. It was on at 6 o'clock, right before Diamond and Silk, Crystal Clear. Yes, Diamond and Silk are also over there at Newsmax, as well as former Trump press secretary Sean Spicer has a show. And I believe the guy that used to do Fox and Friends first before the real Fox and Friends is also over on Newsmax now. And a lot more people are going to be coming along to join the network. And I totally support Newsmax. And if you go to their website and give them feedback, they're going to listen to you. But yeah, so let's go back to this record cases of the coronavirus and the deaths are going up and all this crazy stuff. China, remember early on in this virus, China and the World Health Organization were telling us it wasn't that bad. They tried to blame the U.S. military on releasing this on the people of Wuhan. But you notice, once supposedly this meat market or wet markets, whatever the hell nasty shit they're eating in China, I don't want to know. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to hear about it. Don't tell me it's disgusting. But like, early on, they were saying it wasn't all that bad, and they were like, it won't spread, and all this false information they put out. And then they try to be delusional enough to say that we released this on their people. But they didn't stop that virus from leaving Wuhan. They stopped it from coming to mainland China. And then it came to the U.S. And then suddenly, we shut down our economy for a while because of this virus. And because all these political advisors that Trump shouldn't have been listened to in the background that were Washington insiders, and they think they know it all, but Trump had the greatest political instincts in history, so he should have fucking stuck to his guns and ignored these people because they really sold them out, every freaking one of the swamp rats they are. So then this virus gets to America, and the Democrats use it to their advantage to change state laws and to extend all this mail-in voting and mass ballots and just stuff that's going to make it rampant for fraud and make it also a lot easier for people dead to vote. Yes, lots of dead people vote, including ones that registered the same year they were born. In this country, you can't register to vote until you're 18, but people that would have been 120 years old have voted. According to Corey Lewandowski, or no, it was Rudy Giuliani, in the press conference they did yesterday, even Will Smith's father, who's been dead for 2 years, voted in Philadelphia. We need to clean up the voter rolls, like I was stating earlier, with some kind of national database so it knows when you register one place and another. And yes, so somebody can get that info to the government out there and tell them this is what you should do. Maybe they'll take my advice, but it's highly unlikely. And I probably should be a politician, but I don't want to be a politician because I don't want to be attacked like Donald Trump. I get attacked enough doing this podcast, but it's not to the extent of big money would be coming after me. Because if I was going to run for Congress in my district, I'd have to run against Richard Neal, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he's run unopposed for many, many years. He actually had a primary challenger this year, but they attacked him with some false allegations about when he was worked at UMass, or he was a professor there or something, before he became the mayor of a major city in Massachusetts. So, of course, the Democrat machine went after him, just like they tried to go after Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and it all backfired in their frickin' faces. But that takes us to Georgia. After the recount, if there's 2 Senate runoff elections, those are going to be the most expensive frickin' political races in history, more than this presidential election. Watch, the money is going to be disgusting. And all you people spending this outrageous amounts of money in politics, you're all assholes. Give that money to charity and do something good with your lives. So yeah. So now we got all this record voting going on because of this virus sent to us by China. If that's a Chinese military weapon and it was released on purpose, that is 100% foreign interference in a United States election. And there needs to be a special counsel and a frickin' Homeland Security investigation into this crap, because maybe the frickin' Biden and the DNC, remember, Hunter Biden, still under investigation by the FBI for money laundering, made many deals with the Chinese, and he flew on Air Force Two with who? Oh yeah, former Vice President and supposedly President-elect, Joseph R. Biden. So then I see one of these pollsters come on, and she said 1/3 of the people that voted for Biden actually voted for Biden. 2/3 of them just voted against Donald Trump. So if you went for the people that voted for Trump and the people that voted for Biden, Biden would have been sent packing long ago in an utterly embarrassing defeat. I also wouldn't doubt that the Democrats are ballot harvesting, and they are out paying people money secretly in cash to register to vote in record numbers and to vote for Biden. And if you notice where the fraud's coming, Detroit, Philadelphia, the inner city, where people tend to have lower incomes and struggle. So if somebody says, hey, I'll give you $100 to vote for Joe Biden, you might just say, holy crap, man, I'm broken. You might just do it and not realize that this is a crime. But not knowing the law is no defense, and you will still be convicted if that's what happened of election interference or fraud or whatever. But yes, this is 100% this virus. It's a fact. I'm going to fact. The virus came from China, and it affected people in America, and it affected our elections. So therefore, China interfered in a U.S. election. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but no, that is fact, reality. The COVID virus came from China, and it affected the outcome and the turnout in the United States election. Whether the Democrats are involved, like I said, that part may be conspiracy, but the deep state is deep, and you've seen what happened over the last 4 years with this fake dossier. But let's go full circle. Let's open a special counsel investigation, really. Let's do it and investigate if that is a military weapon at Homeland Security, and they're probably already doing it, though, so whatever. But this episode's getting a little long-winded, but with so much going on this week, can you blame me? Oh my God, my head's been spinning and like twists and turns at every level, and there's just going to be more and more and more crazy stuff. But the media, they're going to have a big problem after. In the 2000 election with the recount, America wasn't divided like it was now. Politics didn't dominate everybody's life. It wasn't the only thing that people are hyper-focused on. In the year 2000, people are just living their life. And after like a couple of weeks of this recount,